Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Very, very excited to introduce all of you to some friends of SBS Commerce, both at SourceDay and RF Ideas. And Clint and Keith will be sharing some stories and some learnings that they have had regarding preventing late supplier deliveries through collaboration, some of the solutions that they provide and experiences that they have had over the years. So thank you all very much for joining, taking the time out of your day to learn, and we look forward to a great session here. So first, to meet the panel, to introduce myself, Tony Thrasher. I'm Senior Director of Product Management here at SBS Commerce. I've been in the retail supply chain for over 15 years, and today I'll be your facilitator. Introductions here, and then there will be a Q&A session at the end that I'll help facilitate. But for the experts here, we have Clint McCree, co-founder of SourceDay, and then Keith Johnson, supply chain partner at RF Ideas. Clint and Keith bring a ton of experience to the conversation today. Both of them are going to provide a little bit more in-depth introduction later in the presentation. But welcome to Clint and Keith. So before diving in, just want to provide a little bit of context and introduction to the topic. Obviously, at SBS Commerce, we work with many of you retailers, suppliers on the sell side of your business, making sure that you can receive purchase orders and collaborate on those purchase orders when you're selling wholesale goods to retailers, distributors, grocers, et cetera. And really, today we're going to be focusing on another critical side of your supply chain, which is the procurement of raw materials or finished goods on what is potentially referred to as the buy side of your business. And this is really where Clint and Keith shine. So very excited to bring these two conversations together today. One last housekeeping item on my side, you will see in your Zoom kind of control bar, you'll see a Q&A icon. If you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to click on there and drop a question in. At the end, we will facilitate a Q&A for 10 to 15 minutes or however many questions we may have to the panelists, so Clint and Keith can chime in on questions that you have. So don't be shy. Feel free to drop those in. We will wait to the end and cover off on all of those questions. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Clint. And Clint is going to dive in on our topic today. So thank you very much, Clint, and the forum is yours.
Thank you, Tony. I appreciate it. And first, just let me say thank you to everyone here today. We're excited to co-present with our friends at SBS. So many of you have been working with SBS probably for quite some time and interested in what SourceDay is here. And as Tony mentioned, we're on the supply side of the business, and one of the things I wanted to, or the supply buy side of your business, one of the things I just wanted to give you is a little bit more on my background. So I am the co-founder of SourceDay. We've been doing SourceDay now for many years, but prior to SourceDay, which is a software supply chain application, I was in manufacturing. So just like many of you, I spent a lot of time dealing with suppliers and parts and late parts and manufacturing issues, to the extent that they were so harsh for me that I started a software company to help other companies solve for those exact same problems. So very excited to be here. I'm also, later on, we'll be giving the microphone to Keith at RF Ideas. Keith is really probably who we all want to hear from, because he's a customer that was going to talk about before and after his life with SourceDay. So we're excited to have him share that story with you. So first, let me just level set. Let me just walk you through some slides here just to give you an understanding of what we're about and maybe how we can help your business. We want to talk to you today about preventing late supply deliveries. That's a big problem. Supply chain has been in the headlines now for a couple of years. Supply chain is being discussed in boardrooms. The supply chains are being discussed in leadership meetings. And so it's a thing that it's an area of opportunity for businesses to improve upon. A lot of companies have no problems investing in the sales side of the organization, the customer delivery side of the organization, but few make the investments they need in the buy side. So that we wanted to talk to you about that today. Let me see if I get my slides to work. One of the first things that you might be surprised to learn is that in your world of procurement, your buy side of your business, that 52% of your purchase orders that you send to your suppliers are going to change. Changes can be date changes, pricing changes, quantity changes, but they're in a constant state of change. And we know this because one of the things that's nice about SourceDay is while you're still using your ERP applications to create and surface your purchase orders, SourceDay is delivering those purchase orders to your suppliers and ensuring your suppliers are receiving those. So we see it. And we see all the changes. We facilitate and help automate a lot of those changes. And we're going to get into that a little bit later. But for those of you who are not SourceDay customers, these changes that are making at a clip of 52% are happening outside your ERP. And very few companies actually have the resources to get all that data that's changing into the ERP. And that's critical. We're going to get into that here in a little bit, but that's an important thing to understand. Another thing that you might be surprised to learn is that we see on average that 33% of your parts are late. Now, is for those of you who are manufacturers out there, you know you need all the parts. We can't ship a bicycle out the door if we're missing the bicycle seat. And one of the challenges with this 33% number is the parts that are late today aren't necessarily the parts that are going to be late tomorrow. So it's very difficult. So helping organizations manage by exception, see these things in advance is very important. And the other thing that we're going to get into as well is that all of this data that's either changing or not changing, is out to date, is impacting other parts of the organization, including AP. I'm sure many of you that are in procurement are constantly dealing with the accounts payable team on getting the invoices correct. And a lot of that is because the data coming from the suppliers is inaccurate. So we're going to talk more about that today. Let me pause. First thing I need to do here, though, is I'm curious from the audience. By the way, should have mentioned, we're going to do a couple of polls today throughout this webinar. So right now, we're going to pause and do our first poll. And I'd like to understand from your perspective, based on your knowledge, roughly what's your range of purchase orders data is changing for you guys? So question number one is, everyone is experiencing PO changes this year. Based on your knowledge, roughly what range of PO changes are you experiencing? I'd love to know that. The second question, part of this poll, is what's your biggest pain point with your direct material POs this year? Direct materials, if you're not familiar with that term, are your cost of goods, the parts, the screws, the nuts, the bolts, the washers that you're buying from your suppliers. So I'll give you a second to answer that. Hopefully we can get that answered. And if we don't have anyone answer, we can just move right along. Okay. Yeah, so it looks like most of you agree that between 25 and 50% of your purchase orders are changing, which is what we would expect to see. Missed customer delivery dates. Now this is a big one that is really interesting. What we find is when we are talking to customers just like yourself, is if I ask you a question, have you ever had the situation where a purchase order or a supplier disruption has led to a customer problem, like a missed shipment? And everyone would say yes. The challenge that we find is that most organizations actually don't measure that impact. And that's something that we're helping organizations do. Okay, thank you for that poll. All right, so we'll just keep going here. Okay, so additional common problems that we see for manufacturers that may be relatable to you. This all stems from this changes in purchase orders. This sounds incredibly simple. We think it's just something that's isolated to the procurement department, but what's actually happening is there's a ripple effect or a fanning effect of when this data is changing and it's not being updated, we have poor data quality in our ERP system. For those of you who are running MRP, this is even a magnifying problem because your MRP is literally using the data to help you make good decisions. And if it has bad information to begin with, then you're going to have bad information coming out of that. You probably have heard people in your own organization say, we don't trust the data in the system. Well, that's very common. We hear that a lot. And a lot of that stems from not getting that initial data from the supplier accurate. Another thing is, when the organization is trying to maneuver the business and make good decisions, if they don't have good information, then they're going to have visibility problems. They're not going to know when to schedule production. You're not going to know what to tell your customers in terms of what they can expect. And the problem kind of just goes on and on. We see this from time to time where this lack of credibility with data and information is causing internal friction between departments. And the other thing is, it's very difficult to evaluate suppliers. Like, how many of you out there have said, man, we'd really like to have a supplier scorecard? Well, the challenge for so many companies is you have to base your scorecard off of the data that's in your ERP. Well, if that data is not accurate, then you can't accurately, evaluate your supply chain. And so again, having that data to be accurate is important, and we'll talk about that. Here's where the rubber meets the road. If our supply chain is letting us down, if the data is changing at 52% and our parts are running 30% late all the time, we're going to have poor planning, poor scheduling. Our KPIs for the business are going to be inaccurate. We're going to be missing customer delivery dates, which is problematic because you have a customer satisfaction issue, but maybe you're missing revenue as well. You're missing sales, missing revenue. A lot of times this ties up working capital for organizations. You start to make unhealthy decisions, spend unnecessary money to overcome these supply chain challenges. And what we see a lot of times, especially for the 30% of parts that are late, is companies guess at what to do with their inventory and increase their inventory in order to be able to close the gap with their supply chain disruptions. So all of these things can be very costly to the business. Something as simple as a PO can be incredibly costly to the organization. Here's another thing I wanted to walk you through. This might be something that's relatable to you. So what we know, because we have millions of purchase orders that flow in and out of SourceDay all the time, is that you very likely have a broad mix of suppliers. You might have very low volume mom and pop suppliers, all the way to very large industrial distribution type suppliers. And so you've got a broad mix of suppliers that you're interacting with. But the challenge is all the suppliers really want you to interact with them differently. Some of them want email, some of them want EDI, some of them still require you to fax a purchase order or mail a purchase order. And so you've got all these different types of suppliers, and you've got all these different methods that you're supposed to communicate with them. And so what you end up is something like this. And I can tell you, when I was in manufacturing, we had a Monday morning meeting. And in that meeting, we talked about all the things that we wanted to get built that week. And it always kind of came down to a supply chain, a part, something that we needed. And this is what my team was doing to communicate. It was just kind of a chaotic situation. And as we started learning more about the industry, this is what so many companies, and probably your company, is doing to interact with your suppliers. And this can be, pretty problematic, because as you can see on the very far left, all of this communication that's going back and forth with price changes and date changes and PO acknowledgement changes is not getting into the ERP. The ERP is disconnected. So somebody's got to manually do that. And so this is where solutions like SourceDay come in. When you think about your business and you think about the ERP application that you're using on the buy side and really to run your organization, you have key stakeholders in your company using the system to make sound decisions to drive the business forward. But there's another stakeholder that's completely disconnected, and those are your suppliers. And so that's what SourceDay is doing, is we are connecting those disconnected suppliers into your business so you can make better decisions, so you can feel more comfortable in strategic planning and making customer commitments and knowing when to set up schedules, et cetera. And ultimately, as we talked about, is when you start thinking about losing a purchase order, missing a part, not being able to ship something out, and having an impact to your revenue or having an impact to that customer satisfaction, all of those things can be addressed with a solution like SourceDay. And it doesn't matter how much you invest on the sales side of your organization, if you don't have the parts to make the widgets to ship out, none of that investment is going to see any of the ROI. So that's where we're here today, is to start talking about looking at investment in your supply chain. Okay, a couple more slides here. So this is where the power, this is where the power of SourceDay comes in. So if you're following along with the story right now, you're understanding that it's a very disconnected, siloed communication with your suppliers. You've got to use a variety of different ways to communicate. SourceDay brings all that into one single collaboration. We call it unified supplier collaboration for your direct material spend for your suppliers. And whether those suppliers want to work with you in email, or whether those suppliers want to log into the SourceDay platform itself, or whether the suppliers want to do EDI or do some sort of data-to-data exchange through systems, SourceDay has you covered. And so what's nice is that you don't have to worry about that. You cut your purchase orders in your ERP just like you always do, and then SourceDay will grab the information out of your ERP and manage the facilitation of the purchase orders and the interaction of those purchase orders with your suppliers. And the beautiful thing is that if there's something that needs your attention, a supplier wants to ask you a question, or they want to make a date change, or they want to make a cost change, they can easily do that in email or in the platform, and you get a notification that says this supplier wants you to approve this change. Once you approve it, it updates your ERP automatically without having anybody interact with it manually. So it's all one solution, one unified supplier collaboration solution to interact with any of your suppliers wherever they are and however they want to work with you. So it's pretty streamlined. Okay, I'm gonna just one of the things we wanted to do today was just give you a taste of what it looks like in SourceDay, just so you have a sense for what it looks like. So I wanted to walk you through what that looks like today. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time here. These are screenshots, not actually demo of the solution. If you want to see a demo of SourceDay, then reach out to me, or you can reach out to Tony, and we'll arrange that for you and your organization, your team, no problem. But just wanted to give you a feel for this. So when you create purchase orders in SourceDay on your ERP, they will come into the SourceDay application where your buyers can interact with it, your suppliers can interact with it, or your suppliers may not interact in SourceDay specifically. Maybe they're going to interact through email. Either way is fine. But one of the things I just wanted to show you is just a couple of key areas that are important. When you create a purchase order, one of the first things we want to do is make sure all your purchase orders are acknowledged and not lost. So we bring them in and flag them as pending. That way, you know, and your suppliers know that those are brand new orders, and that they need to take care of those before they do anything else. That way, nothing falls through the cracks. Then, as the purchase order is going through its life cycle, it could fall into any one of these various buckets, like late and hot and shipped, etc. But one of the other areas I wanted to point out is this radar functionality. This is a really cool thing that essentially taps your suppliers on the shoulder at a designated time to remind them that your part is coming upon its due date. So let's say you've got a part that's due in 2 weeks, and you've got a supplier, Acme Inc., and you say, hey, 2 weeks from that, you want them to be reminded just to make sure that it's on track, that it's going to be there in 2 weeks, that nothing's going to fall through the cracks. SourceDay does that for you automatically, sends out that reminder to the supplier. Supplier can respond to that, and you can have all the updated information. So it's a way to manage by exception. So we're not going to put something in a radar or notify the supplier of something that is coming due if it's due in a year from now and your radar is set for 2 weeks. It's only a managed by exception type of application, which is great. Okay, here. Once a supplier wants to interact with you and communicate with you, one of the things that's very important, like for most organizations today, is if you get a purchase order, you send a purchase order to a supplier and they respond back with a PDF with a bunch of changes, you've got to look at 2 different documents and see like what's the original information, what's the new information, and then you go into your system and you approve it. SourceDay does that by default. So you can see here, we put into red anything that's going to change. So supplier wants to communicate that they want to increase the price, or they want to change the delivery date. All you've got to do is review it here. If you approve it, you hit accept, and we'd update your ERP. That can be one PO line. That could be hundreds of PO lines if you want to use the bulk functionality. But again, making it really simple for you to do it. But by making it simple, we're ensuring that the data is being updated and accurate in the ERP, which is, again, goes back to our first thing is that's the most critical thing that you need to do as an organization. All right, supplier scorecards, almost here for Keith's spot here, but supplier scorecards. One of the things that we talked about is, wouldn't it be nice if you could score your suppliers? But the problem is what do we do about the data? Well, SourceDay, because we're in the business of keeping that data accurate and getting information from all your suppliers, we also have the ability to score all your suppliers. So SourceDay set up parameters based on what's important to you. And once you do that, SourceDay will score all your suppliers. I came from an ISO 9000 organization and we had to score our suppliers, but it was difficult. We only really had time to do 1 or 2 or 3 suppliers per audit and didn't get to the whole supplier base, which was thousands. So this is an opportunity or a solution that can do all of it all the time and in real time. So you can see here, we really grade on 3 KPIs: on-time delivery, responsiveness, so how responsive is the supplier to you, and price, whether their price is going up, are they trending up, they trending down, etc. So one of the things this is another question for the audience here. Let's poll you. Would love to know what your would love to know for you on the supplier scorecards, are they important, and what metrics is most important to you, to your organization? All right, let's go to the results here. I'm not seeing the results. There we go. Okay, well, no surprise here. If everybody can see this, on-time delivery is by far the most important. And that's interesting, right? That's the thing that we're challenged with the most. As we mentioned, 30% of the parts arrive late or not at all. So it's good to see that that you guys are following along with that as well. Thank you. Okay, so I don't want to go too much into this, but this is our ability for your suppliers, if they want to be, and you and your procurement team, to be able to track ASNs and shipping information and get that data back into your ERP. And so lastly here, before we throw it over to Keith, just a couple last benefits. We've already hit a lot of these, but when you use a solution like SourceDay with your buy side of your business, it helps you improve that data accuracy. Of course, streamlining communication with your suppliers. This is so many of our customers are in the dark ages with respect to how we interact with our suppliers. And, the analogy I always love to use is like Venmo, right? I mean, I can Venmo my kids money and know they have it right away, but you can send a purchase order to your supplier and have no visibility to whether they have received the PO, much less whether they can deliver the goods. So it's time for us to move procurement in to the more of the modern age. Talked about catching up, protecting that cash flow, customer satisfaction, and ultimately for businesses that are trying to grow, using an automation solution like SourceDay to unify that supplier collaboration to have one way of doing it versus many ways of doing it allows you to lock into scalability for the organization. Okay, that's enough for me. Let's kick it over to the main guy here, Keith with RF Ideas. They've been a customer of ours for a while. And I'm going to let him give a little bit on his background and then let him tell his story. Keith?
Okay. Thanks, Clint. As Clint said, my name is Keith Johnson. I've been at RF Ideas for a little over 5 years now. Prior to this, I've been in supply chain my entire career. I've been in supply chain before supply chain was even a term. We've been on SourceDay about 1.5 years now. And an unsolicited answer, I love this system. It has made my job so much easier. So if you have any questions as I go through this, raise your hand, holler, whatever, and we'll stop and we'll try and give you an answer here. So RF Ideas is a identity access management company. Long story short, we help protect your data through the use of our RF readers. We also have Bluetooth readers. Right behind me, you see one of our fingerprint readers. So if you need data protected, we can help you in one form or another. So who are we? Within our organization, and we're about an $80 million company, there are 2 people in receiving, 2 in shipping, 2 of us that coordinate production at contract manufacturers. As an asset-light company, we have no capabilities to produce anything here in our building. So everything we get, we rely on contract manufacturers to provide to us. We have 1 person in pre-production who takes care of new items that our engineering group is designing and coming up with. and he also works with bringing on new suppliers. We have one that ensures all of our inventory transactions are correct, handles our cycle count process. So when we look at the system and the system says I have 10 pieces, I can pretty well guarantee you I've got 10 pieces of part 1A1 on my shelf. All in all, before Source Day, we had a huge workload. The way we would do it within NetSuite, we would create the PO, the system would automatically email it out if we had an email in the system. Otherwise, we would print the PO, attach it to an email, and then send it out, and then wait for some sort of acknowledgement. Sometimes we got them, sometimes we didn't. When you didn't, you just hope that that date was correct. We never knew for sure. Many times it took follow-up phone calls, follow-up emails saying, hey, where's my PO? What's going on? Have you got this? Is this still good for the date that we wanted it? And if they responded at that point, then we could adjust dates if needed. Going through this was a huge clerical task. When you stop and look at how many POs, and we're running probably in the neighborhood of 500 to 600 POs at any given time, which I know for some of you is probably a small number, but for our size, that's a pretty good size to handle with just one person handling all the POs. So we knew something had to change. We weren't maintaining the system. Data integrity was poor at best. We never knew when product was coming in. We had no clear-cut idea on how to project what our inventory values were, because a lot of times we would issue a blanket PO and we would issue one PO for 300,000 cables. I don't want 300,000 cables at once. I know I'm going to get it over the course of time. So we just put the date out at the end of the year and just draw in from that supplier. He never knew when we were going to do this. What did we need? It was just kind of a guess on all of our parts. We also had huge invoice discrepancies, especially on products that we buy that are volume sensitive. We buy a lot of the decals. We buy a lot of the legal inserts. Like anything that most of you folks know, all of those are volume sensitive. My price to buy one label versus 10,000 labels is going to be significantly different. So we're constantly fighting, what's the correct price on there? As such, invoice discrepancies were through the roof. I'd spend probably a quarter of my day answering what is the correct invoice price. We never knew if product was going to be here on time. That's now answered within Source Day because everything is updated almost instantaneously. When we get the acknowledgement back, it's just a matter of clicking a button saying, yep, I agree. As Clint pointed out, that automatically feeds into my system. All of a sudden, our on-time delivery went from probably 40, 50% to in the 90s somewhere. I haven't taken a look to see exactly where we're at, but just gut feel says it's in the 90s. So, like I said, reviewing our acknowledgments is a heartbeat. Our pricing is correct, and everything is updated automatically directly into NetSuite. So, number of discrepancies that we've had for either price or date, once processed through Source Day, automatically goes in a heartbeat, it's in the system. instead of spending hours going through and looking for emails to see when did this guy actually send this information into us and what did he say when the acknowledgement came in, I just know right away it's what's in the system is now correct. This has freed up a lot of my time to work on a lot of the other data integrity issues that we've had in our system because we just never had time. We now have a system that is useful, accurate, and legitimate. And I'm sure many of you out there, that's what you want. So that's pretty much all I have. If there are any questions, fire away.
Excellent. Thank you, Keith and Clint. That was fantastic. So before we transition over to Q&A from the audience, I know Clint, you had some follow-up questions for Keith directly from you. So I'll turn it over to you, and then we'll facilitate based on some of the questions that came in during the presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. I appreciate it. Yeah, I thought it might be interesting for the audience to just get a little flavor, Keith, on some of the early doings of like when you were working with SourceDay's. So like when you first started, how long did it take you to go from, looking at SourceDay to, going live and with your customers? Do you recall how long that took?
I want to say when we initially decided to go with it to the time that we actually got contacted back by SourceDay and we started going through the process, it was maybe about 6 weeks when we went to our first group of suppliers.
Good. Did you ever have any concerns about supplier adoption? I know we get that question a lot. I'm curious if you felt like that was ever a problem and when you were working with us originally.
We have 98% of our spend on SourceDay right now. So the vast majority of our purchases run through the SourceDay some way or another. To this point, I have had one individual or one company that has told us, no, we're not going to do it. And that's a multi-billion-dollar corporation that we deal with.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. So we probably now with the new unified supplier collaboration, we should definitely probably talk to them about that, because I think that we can maybe help overcome that. Excellent. Well, one of the things I was really curious about is, so when I was running my manufacturing company, it didn't happen often, but every once in a while, I'd say like once or twice a year, we would cut a purchase order to a supplier, and they, we would send it to them. At least we thought we sent it to them. We thought we did. We are waiting on the part to show up. The due date comes and goes. The part doesn't show up. We call the supplier and ask them, hey, what's the status of this part? And they tell us the thing that we do not want to hear, which is, we never got that PO. We never received it. Has that ever happened to you before?
No, never. Yes, we have had that happen. Problem we ran into, we buy cables and our supplier is actually in China. We found them to be the cheapest source of the cables that we need. Every one of our readers has a cable to plug into your computer. We had a supplier that it was a unique cable for a unique product. We called them when we were starting to get low and said, hey, where is this cable? And he's like, I don't have any POs for it. And that created all sorts of panic, because now that means that that's that penny screw on the automotive line that I can't build my reader without that cable because I've got nothing to plug it in with. Needless to say, we talked to him. We got him to expedite it. We did pay a fee for that. Then we had to air freight product from China into the US. And none of that comes very cheaply.
Yeah. So I actually had a very, very similar experience. We were air freighting private jets parts around at one point, But and it always feels like, at least it was in my experience, it's like always the longest lead time the parts. It's not the stuff that you can buy, you can put an order on it today and get it tomorrow. It's the 12-week lead time part that, is the one that we messed up. So anyways, that's really good intel. You might have said, but what ERP are you on there?
We are on NetSuite.
You're on NetSuite. Okay. So one of the things I just wanted to point out, and then Tony, I'm going to give it right back to you here in a sec here is, in terms of ERPs, we support tons of ERPs. NetSuite is one that we support. We support a lot of Infor ERPs, Epicor, SAP, Microsoft. So if you're on any of those ERPs, we are ERP agnostic. So just wanted to point that out as well. Keith, thank you very much. Tony, I'm going to give it to you.
Excellent. Thank you both. So some additional questions that came in during the presentation that we'll cover. So Clint, I'll direct this one at you.
Okay.
Of the audience members. Could you just speak to the fee structure or the fees to my supplier should I choose to use SourceDay?
Keith could probably answer this questions as well. So we don't charge. We license SourceDay to our customer, which in this case is like Keith. So Keith pays for SourceDay, but Keith, none of your suppliers pay for SourceDay. That part is free, right?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
And the price to us is very reasonable. I don't remember the exact price because I don't always see the invoices, but it's a very, very reasonable cost.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So short answer is, Tony, there's no cost for suppliers to use SourceDay.
Excellent. So then another question here. What options do you have for my non-EDI or non-electronic data capable suppliers?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we've over the course of the years of our business, we get asked a lot of questions about supplier usage. And what's really great is it doesn't matter really how the supplier wants to interact with you. We're not changing the supplier's process. So if the supplier wants to use email, if the supplier wants to use EDI or some other way, or they want to log into the SourceDay portal, any of that is available to them. So we're not asking the suppliers to change their process at all. So for the mom and pops out there that just have access to email, that's fine. They can interact with you through email, and then we capture that data and get it into the SourceDay application, and then also into to your ERP.
Yep. In fact, to Clint's point, we actually have a supplier that works out of his garage over in Iowa.
That's awesome.
It sounds stupid, but he's the only person that we found that can make a certain antenna for us. Antennas and cables are one of those critical things. If you don't have an antenna, you can't read the card. He works out of his garage over in Iowa. They're on SourceDay. We brought them up. They had no questions beyond just the initial training of what am I doing here? Walk me through the process.
Yeah, Keith, I can just tell you a little sidebar. So I ran an electronics manufacturing company in Austin. Same deal. We had a couple guys in their garage. I mean, I think it just, especially when you're custom, like we built custom products for oil and gas exploration, kind of the same deal. We had very large suppliers too. We had the big guys too, but definitely the small guys. All right, Tony. Sorry, we got sidetracked.
No, that's fantastic. This is maybe just a little deeper spin into the direction you were just going there too. But the question is, what if my supplier doesn't want to use a portal? Can you just expand on some of those additional options that you can still get that order volume, maybe without them wanting to leverage the portal itself?
Yeah, great question. So it's very similar to the one that was asked earlier. So we probably addressed it earlier, but just to double click on that. I mean, essentially, if the supplier uses the most common form of communication is email. So SourceDay traditionally has had a portal interface the entire time, and so many suppliers, a lot of the suppliers prefer to log into SourceDay because you get so much more enriched data about your customer. So you're seeing the POs, you're seeing due dates, and you can have collaboration and you can see the history. So like if you're changing dates on POs and the buyer approves that date, and then it comes back to you a couple weeks later and your customer says, hey, why did you deliver that part late? They can see inside SourceDay all the log, the audit log of everything that's happened on that PO. So that's one of the reasons why so many suppliers love to use it. But if they don't want to, they just can't do it, bandwidth, just feel like this, they just want to stick with email, then they can certainly use that, which is the next form of communication that we support. And then they're just doing the same thing. They're going to get an email from SourceDay, but it's going to have the purchase order in it. They can print it. They can do whatever they want with the PO. They can interact with the PO. They can respond to the email. So just kind of how they're doing it now. They're not really that different. But what's different for us is that we capture that data back out of that email and put it into the SourceDay application. So the buyer side, so like Keith's side of the business, has one single area and solution to go to see information for all their POs, regardless of how the supplier is interacting with them.
And like I shared earlier, to this point, we've had one supplier that pushed back and said, no, we're not going to do it.
Perfect. Yeah.
And that's from mom and pop to anywhere in between a couple $100,000 in sales up to the billion-dollar companies.
All right. And then I had one last question, put you two gentlemen on the spot a little bit. That's coming from me and the SBS team. One final parting thought or summary from each of you to our attendees that are looking at this part of their business.
Keith, I'm going to let you go first on that. That's such a tough one. I need time to think.
For me, I love the system. It has made my job infinitely easier. Everything's all in one place. As Clint alluded to, when I get into a contest back and forth with the supplier, I can look into the system behind it, look at the history. I can see exactly what the supplier told me once. And if he says, no, I never said that, I can pull that up, do a screen print and say, yeah, you did. Here it is right here. It's made our job much easier when we've gotten into issues where the supplier says, well, I can't deliver on a certain date. Another great thing that we found is that, like I said previously, in the past, we would order 300,000 cables. I know I didn't want 300,000 cables at once. SourceDay allows me and allows him to come in and say, I'm going to deliver 10,000 every 3 weeks, and these are the dates that you're going to get them. That'll gives us better visibility to our inventory projections, gives him a better visibility as to when he needs to have product available on the shelf.
Great answer. Great answer. For me, Tony, here's what I would say. It's very easy for organizations out there to justify investment in the sales side of their business. We all do it. You know, I'm a founder of SourceDay. We do it. It's more difficult, or has historically been more difficult, for companies to find the justification to invest in their procurement. But the justification has actually always been there. It's just, you know, creating that connective tissue between a supply side problem to a sell side problem as well. They are connected, and more common than most organizations really understand. So what I would say is, whether you're looking at SourceDay or, you know, just trying to understand how to be more efficient business, a great opportunity for you is to go digging into the procurement side of your business. There's a lot of opportunities to remove manual processes, to improve supplier performance, to basically improve that side of your business. SourceDay would love to be a catalyst to help you do that, and we would like to be a part of that. But, you know, that's what I would encourage you to do, because there's lots of opportunity for improvement, and that side of the business is for most organizations.
Excellent. Appreciate
That's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate both of you with a little bit of on the spot action there. So that concludes the content that we have for all the attendees today. And, from SBS Commerce, just want to obviously thank all of you for joining, listening, asking questions. Really hope that you got a lot of value out of today's session. Some contact information here on the screen. If you have any questions for the SourceDay team, you can get a hold of Clint directly via the phone number on your screen. Obviously, you can reach out to the SBS Commerce team as well at any point in time. Clint mentioned the demo, but even just follow-up questions, et cetera. So again, Thank you all that attended. And then Clint, thank you very much, obviously, for joining, running the webinar. And Keith, can't thank you enough to bring all this to life for all of us. So thank you very much again, and enjoy the rest of your day.